Since I did a YouTube video, so today I am going to make a video on making my son his weighted blanket. So if anyone doesn't know what a weighted blanket is, they are pretty much a quilted blanket filled with plastic pellets that are used for children with sensory issues as a way to calm them and help them sleep better. My son requires one, but he wants a Harry Potter one. And online the Harry Potter ones were like £120. So I bought him a Hogwarts blanket, a metre of Ravenclaw fleece, and 3 kilograms of the pellets, as you can see. And all of this came to about £30. A day of sewing and he shall have a 1 metre by 1.5 metre blanket. So that is them, and I will be back. Okay, so with right sides facing one another and matching up the two pieces of fabric, I am first pinning the short end at the bottom of the blanket with these sewing clips, making sure everything matches up. And then I'm going to clip down the two long sides and I'm going to sew up and around the two blankets together. And I'm going to turn it the right way out and show you how I'm going to sew it to allow for the weighted pellets to be put in. So that's step 1. Putting the wrong sides of your fabric together, pinning 3 sides and sewing around them to join them up. Okay, I've turned it the right way out, and before I did so, I snipped the corners off so I would get like a decent corner when I turned it the right way out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a row of stitching around all the edges to make the blanket lie flat and sort of keep the edges together where I want them to be. And then the next stage is going to be to measure across the width of my blanket to make channels for the pellets. So I'll measure my blanket, divide it equally, and probably make 10 centimetre channels. I'll have to measure down the length of the whole blanket and sew channels from the shorter end to the open end right along the blanket. I'll show you when I get to that. Okay, now that I have sewed up all the edges to make the blanket lie flat, I'm going to measure out my channels. Now, when I was looking up research on how to make a weighted blanket, they said your squares can be between 3 and 5 inches. And each of these pockets will hold your pellets. So, as my blanket is a metre wide, I think I'm going to go for 4 inches. And that should divide the blanket up pretty nicely. If I've got a slightly shorter square on the end, I'm going to divide the difference between this end and that end, so the outside edges would be smaller squares, if that makes sense. So I'm going to aim for 4 inches anyway. If it doesn't work out, I'll come back and remeasure, but I want to divide the blanket up as equally as possible. And I'm going to mark my sewing lines with pins, and I'm going to do that all the way down the blanket, measuring from my sewing seam line until I have a row of long channels right to the open end of the blanket, because this is where we're going to put the pellets in. It's all the way down here, this open end. So I'm going to measure, I'm only going to do 1 channel at a time. Once I figure out the spacing, it'll just be easier to have 1 row of pins rather than a blanket covered in pins. It means I don't have to use pen or anything. So once I've figured out the spacing and got 1 channel ready, I'll show you. Okay, so I have been sewing line by line. I've been measuring from the line, pinning all the way down the blanket so that I've got a whole bunch of channels across my blanket. And when I go across this way, I'm going to use the stripes as my guidelines to make my squares. But once I have finished pinning and sewing the last couple of channels, I will show you what we do next. Okay, so now all the channels are sewn in, as you can see. I mean, I wasn't super specifically like anal about getting them really straight, so some of mine are a little bit wobbly, but I don't care. This is for my son. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to count every one of these squares over the whole blanket, and there is a lot, and then I'm going to divide the pellets equally among the amount of squares using a kitchen scale, and I'm going to then put one small square amount in each channel, put it all the way to the end of the blanket where the blanket is sewed shut. Then, so all the pellets will be at the very top of the blanket. I will sew straight across this line, put more pellets in from the open end in each channel, then sew across that line and continue to work that way. I will show you when I've done the first weighted channel. Okay, so I figured out I needed a tablespoon of pellets in every square. So I put them in each channel, put them all the way down to the edge, and as you're sewing you really need to make sure all the pellets are pushed to one side when you sew. I am just following the line. Once that one is sealed, I will put the pellets in again and continue all the way over to the very end of the blanket, and then I'll show you how I close the blanket up. I'm about halfway now up the blanket, and as you can see, when I put the pellets in and let them fall down to where they're going, I've been pinning just above them before sewing it shut. And then what I do is I put more pellets in from the top, and when they fall down I move the pins up before I sew it on my sewing machine. So I'm about halfway. This part is the really time consuming part because you have to stop between each row to then put more pellets in, but I think it'll be worth it. It's starting to really feel really heavy and it looks really good, so I shall continue. Okay, so I have done the very last row of the pellets and the squares, and I had stopped sewing a good seam allowance down where I wanted the blanket to end. So all I need to do now is trim the blanket, give myself a fair bit. When I trim it, I will tuck in the edges like so and run a stitch right across the base, and the blanket will be finished. Just need to take all these pins out so they're all full, and the blanket overall is pretty heavy, but because it's spread over the entire blanket, it won't be too heavy when it's on top of him when he's in his bed. So I'll get that finished and show you it properly. I just thought I would show you that I've trimmed the edges and I've folded them in. Now I just need to sew right along that edge and the blanket will be finished. It is completely done. The back is Ravenclaw fabric. The front says waiting for my letter from Hogwarts. I can't even speak. Waiting for my letter from Hogwarts. And as you can see, the very bottom has that really small seam that I made. The whole thing is pretty heavy. I ended up not using all of the pellets because I didn't take into account the weight of the blanket itself. So once I was sort of working through it, I kind of just went with what I think my son would sort of deal with. And it means I still have half the pellets for making them a second one, so it's a win-win. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that it was helpful for somebody that wants to make a sensory weighted blanket. They're quite expensive online, and with a little effort you can make it yourself. So there you go. Have a nice day.